Other way, is it? Yeah, just to get good to have a slide up there. This, by the way, is a lovely picture of a medieval church somewhere in the Midlands. You're all looking at a lovely day, a beautiful rainbow, an expression of hope and anticipation. And it's only when you look carefully at the aisle roof that you'll see it's completely denuded of lead. Of course, meaning that it's a leaky roof and potentially irreparable damage can be caused not only to the roof but also the contents of a listed building. So just a little bit about me, just to set the scene. I started out in life fully intending to embark on a career in archaeology. I did an archaeology degree at Durham. It was a difficult time for employment in archaeology. I found it difficult to get a job, so I thought I'll join the police for a couple of years and then I'll get a proper job. After a couple of years, I became a detective. I thought I'll give it a couple more years, then I'll get a proper job. Eventually, I ended up running murder investigations, and as Paul says, lots of similarities. Being a senior murder detective and being something like a site director, very, very similar actually skill set, very, very similar job. You're investigating something that happened in the past, preparing a report, etc., managing teams, managing science, technology, DNA, all of that. And then I think much to my surprise and everyone else's, ended up as a police chief constable. As Mark mentioned, for a number of years, I was the National Police Chiefs Council lead for heritage crime. And hopefully we did some of the early things like setting up heritage crime liaison officers in every force, some of the early things that have started on that journey to get us to where we are today. It's lovely, by the way, coming to a conference like this. In the police, you either wear uniform or as detectives, everyone wears suits. It's so lovely not to have to wear a suit, one of the nice differences. Since leaving the police, I've gone back to uni, did a master's degree recently in medieval archaeology, and now work as a specialist heritage crime advisor, working predominantly but not exclusively for historic England, and do quite a lot of voluntary archaeology as well, and also work with, am I allowed to mention the EU? I've mentioned it once. I do some work for the EU as a specialist expert on the Horizon programme, specialising in transnational theft of antiquities, which perhaps raises one important point. I'll go off on a bit of a tangent for 1 second here. That this is, acknowledging, of course, that the police, the other agencies have to deal with a whole range of really serious issues that affect human beings, like violence against women and girls, like child sexual exploitation. And I don't think we can ever pretend that this is going to be as serious as that. Nonetheless, this is important. And it's interesting that in Europe and beyond, this is often referred to as looting and theft. Some of the language, like night hawking, kind of almost glamorises this, and I just call it looting or theft. Anyway, in terms of, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. I'll get this back. In terms of what I've been doing in the last few years working with Historic England, just a few examples of the sorts of projects that we've got involved in. Let me just get this. So up here, an industrial archaeology site in the Midlands, a former coal mine being subject to intense antisocial behaviour. Grimsby, working with David Walsh, a group of lovely Victorian Grade 2 listed buildings where there's a risk of arson. A group of churches in the southwest that were high risk of lead theft. The Royal Pavilion in Brighton, where there are some particular issues about development in a very crime and antisocial behaviour intense area. And a case you've already heard about this morning, the Rutland mosaic that Jenny, I think, spoke very, very eloquently about. And nice to see a few colleagues that I met in the room, Rachel and Vicky. We worked with Tom Cromwell and Nick Carter on that project as well. Nice to see some colleagues in the room. So a range of different archaeology, buildings archaeology, dirt archaeology experience, and we've learned as we go. I'm going to particularly focus today on Heritage Watch, which you've already heard a little bit about, and Jenny has set the scene on that. Heritage Watch is, in some ways, an extension and a branch of Neighbourhood Watch. At its simplest, it is very elegant and straightforward. It is about engaging the community and engaging all of the agencies that can play a part in being the eyes and ears to, in this case, protect really valuable and sometimes irreplaceable heritage. That's a thumbnail of what Heritage Watch is. And I particularly want to major on that. And I'm going to just pick out three very straightforward case studies. One you've already heard a little bit about, but I'm coming from a slightly different angle to Jenny. And then I'm just going to distill in the last minute or two a few kind of emerging themes about that. So, I will get this right. Perfect. Okay. So Heritage Watch, an initiative massively facilitated by Mark and the Historic England team. It engages a whole range of partners. Local neighbourhood watch people who are already perhaps established in existing schemes, Crime Stoppers, which enables anonymous reporting of crime, the police, importantly the fire service, often get forgotten, but arson at some heritage sites is a really significant concern, local authorities. Basically involves everyone, including just local people who care about and for heritage. What does it do? It enables and encourages a two-way flow of information. I think we've talked a lot today. Paul's kind of distilled that key point about communicating with each other and making sure that information is flowing around the system, that the police know what's going on, know what local communities are hearing and aware of. It involves risk assessment, working out where the greatest harms are likely to occur to heritage and how they're likely to occur. Crime prevention measures, and that isn't just technology and locks and bolts. And something I'll just mention very briefly in a moment is confident contact. There's no reason why a police call handler who may live in a city and not know anything about heritage, when they get that phone call at 2 a.m, there's no reason why they should be specialists. They can't be specialists in everything. They may not understand what Grade 2 listing or what a scheduled monument is. And confident contact is about providing a little bit of a route map for people who are reporting heritage crime to enable the police, the fire service and others to give the best response and improve understanding. So that's a bit of a scene setter about Heritage Watch. There are a number of Heritage Watch schemes now running across the country. Some of them are just focused on one or two sites or areas. Others are force-wide. But you can see for yourself the range of forces where Heritage Watch schemes are in place. And it's growing. Mark has asked me and my team to do some work to look to expand it further and to develop a kind of national approach to it with some national standards, core principles, so that there's a consistency at its core across the country. A range of different contexts. We've heard from Jenny. So one particular, I think, very exciting and positive development has been expanding Heritage Watch to the maritime environment and some great work on protected wrecks by MSDS. I'll talk about scheduled monuments in a moment, the Roman Villa, industrial archaeology, and we're about to embark on a new development for Heritage Watch, where we engage with a town council and a whole range of different partnerships, and for the first time look to cover in Oxfordshire a very heritage-rich medieval town. I won't name it, it's in development, but that's a new project just about to launch. So the first case study you've heard about, so I don't need to say too much about this. This all emerged, this is Rutland, it all emerged during COVID, and we were approached by Historic England because this is an area that is particularly predated upon by illicit metal detectorists. And in fact, the mosaic was found by a farmer and his son who were metal detecting on their own land, a little bit, I think, bored during the COVID period and out enjoying the fresh air and doing some father-son stuff, and came across this phenomenal mosaic in a field very close. I think the Cosmic Survey indicated that most of the archaeology was within about 30 centimetres of the surface. High risk from illicit metal detectorists locally, and has been, as has been described, yes, we employed some technology, including the armadillos or Daleks. Here you can see Nick Carter in thoughtful mode, engaging with an armadillo. It's great technology, but one of the points I'd make, and endorsing what Jenny has said about, for example, roof alarms, is these sort of things can be very effective, but you can't beat the human factor and the important wraparound that something like Heritage Watch and partnership action can bring. And here you've got that kind of juxtaposition on the one hand of technology, and here's that community meeting where we got a whole range of partners together. Of course, Historic England colleagues, but also the local authority, the finds liaison officer, the local authority county archaeologist, and importantly, the police. And we got all those people in a room, local history society, and of course, David Harvey, retired chief superintendent, who brilliantly, with Jenny's help, within 2 weeks, we'd got almost 30 volunteers out there in the fields, willing to, if need be, if there'd been a very significant find, just before the weekend, for example, they were volunteering to stay on the site 24 hours a day over the weekend. And the bottom line is that this little team and their colleagues ended up, yes, encountering, I think, one illicit metal detectorist who came on the site as a little tryout and was quickly dispatched. But with the technology and the Heritage Watch team, the net result was there was no disruption whatsoever of the archaeology on that site. So conservation was total from the initial discovery, which is fantastic and would not have been the case had that not occurred. So moving swiftly on, just very quickly. The next one is Southwest churches. We were asked to come in and look at 3 churches, medieval churches, all listed in the Southwest, in the Bristol diocese. So here working with a different set of partners, Historic England, the police down in the Southwest, and importantly here, the Church of England, the diocese. 3 churches judged to be at particularly, you might say, at extreme risk of lead theft, lead-rich roofs. So analysis and risk assessment informed by some work by Opal, a specialist police intelligence team. We identified that, clumsy finger today. The red dot is very close to the move on button. Hotspot area identified, working with that range of partners to identify those very high risk, extreme high risk lead-rich churches, and then engagement at a very local level with church wardens. So this is working very closely with those individual churches. And the aim was to set up a Heritage Watch scheme to do a survey, risk assessment, work out which crime prevention measures were required for those churches. 1, we found already got a roof alarm, but 2, that probably were at greater risk, had no roof alarm, and to try and get some community engagement in Heritage Watch. So that's what we did. we did a drone survey, community meetings, crime prevention survey, et cetera, and we talked to them about confident contact, this idea of kind of scripting that call to the police to get support from the police when required. Interestingly, there was some valuable learning from this. We found it really hard to persuade local people to get involved in Heritage Watch. And I think the reason for that is these were lovely, sleepy, rural, idyllic areas. Crime was just not on their radar. And therefore, they couldn't see the risk. They couldn't appreciate the risk. And there wasn't great enthusiasm, really, to set up a Heritage Watch scheme. And I'll come back to that at the end, because I think there's some learning from that. But what they did like was this scripting of, if there was an incident, how they would call the police and actually make sure that this is given the right priority, as opposed to, oh, it's a bit of lead, as opposed to organised crime that could involve up to £300,000 or £400,000 worth of theft. So I'll come back to that at the end. But again, a different set of partners, a different context, the other end of the spectrum, where it's quite hard to persuade and encourage people to get involved in a partnership approach. And then this is the confident contact form, by the way. Well, not form, it's a guide. It's also online. But it scripts the kind of who, what, where, when, route maps people through the things they just need to kind of mention in that call to the police or the fire service to make sure they get the best response, and kind of sets out what the options are about routes into getting that best response and enabling the police to have the best information to deploy the right resources to the incident. Okay, last case study. 5 minutes to go? Perfect, yeah. The last one I just want to mention, different approach. This is about partnership work in the prevention sphere, but trying to divert, in this case, young people from crime. And it's great to have Andrew Richardson here from Isle Heritage. And this is a scheme which involves identifying, with the Youth Justice Service and others, young people who are children who are committed crime or on the cusp of entering the criminal justice system. Obviously, massively impacts on a child's potential if they get involved in crime. And in this case, there's a separate Rejuvenate project involving Wessex, Archaeology, but this particular initiative involves Isle Heritage, Youth Justice Team, National Trust, and a range of other heritage bodies and the police. And it's all about promoting self-belief, building transferable skills, positive collective impact on young people and those who work with him. And it was, an evaluated project. And in essence, it's about getting those young people out in the outdoors, involved in physical activity, in this case, archaeology. And I think at its core, treating young people who have had a very difficult background and troubled background in positive activity and treating them as adults and getting them involved in positive activity. Very successful. The outcome in terms of youth justice is all of the participants improved in the 4 identified key areas where success or failure was going to be judged. You can read this for yourself. 80% improved control of behaviour at school, better attendance at school, more engaged in learning. The young people had greater confidence, social connections, feelings of pride. They all felt recognised and heard, and a very positive outcome overall. I think one of the participants said this project could really turn their kids' life round. And I just wanted to mention it. It's a different approach to partnership working, but I think real potential for the future. And I think real potential to expand this and to focus it particularly on young people who are involved in heritage crime, have started to get into trouble, perhaps with low-level antisocial behaviour, perhaps with graffiti, and actually steering those young people into projects like Rejuvenate. But it's just a different dimension to crime prevention and a different dimension to partnership working that I wanted to mention. So final slide, Paul will be pleased to hear. Okay. That's it. Okay, early learning, emerging themes. So many heritage sites, statement of the obvious really, are vulnerable to crime, not just in the rural area, actually particularly in urban areas, and the impacts can be high, irreplaceable heritage. It's another statement of the obvious, the criminal justice system and particularly the court service are creaking, they're under pressure, and they are multi-billion pound organisations. Police, for example, cost £18 billion a year. They're under pressure, financial pressure as well, and they're looking for innovative approaches that work, like Rejuvenate, things that are inexpensive, they're not free, but things that work, evidence-based. I think I've made the point, hopefully very powerfully, don't dismiss technology. We love those Daleks, bolts, alarms, locks, they've all got their place. But don't forget the human dimension. It's very powerful, and particularly the partnership, the power of partnerships, of getting teams together. Working with partners takes a little bit longer. It's always easier if you're in charge as archaeologists, but involving those partners is a force multiplier, to use a military expression. It shares costs and it builds resilience and mutual understanding, and all of that can be very valuable. It's not just about the police, it's also about the fire service, local councils who've all got enforcement roles. And I'd also mention, I said earlier, let's not forget for the future, perhaps at a future conference like this, let's think about the National Crime Agency who've got a role to play, particularly internationally, and the Border Force as well. They've got some great people whose job is pretty much to focus on heritage and transnational trafficking. Final points, engaging with new audiences expands the potential workforce. We found on the project, the Mosaic project, the Fuller project that Jenny mentioned, that some of the people who were getting involved in the Heritage Watch scheme then started to volunteer on the excavation as well. Paul mentioned that. So there's a bog off, a buy one, get one free, even more volunteering. And lastly, echoing the words of that young man on Rejuvenate, heritage inspires people, and whether they're young offenders or people in later life volunteering, people love heritage, they care about it, and it embeds people very much in their local landscape, their area. So my argument is partnership is really effective, and don't forget the badging and the cup of tea. That's it. Thank you.